Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
Well, good morning, one and all. It is 5:07 in the a.m., the wee small ones of a Tuesday morning. Yes, it is the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. 2 more days till Turkey D-Day is happening. I know you're prepared, I'm prepared, we're all getting prepared for Thanksgiving. It is, as I said, 5:07 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are making sense of the news. I am Andrew Langer, in for Larry O'Connor this week, and joining me this morning is Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation. Hello, Hans. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, and fortunately made it into the studio before the rush of traffic of everybody leaving town for Thanksgiving.
It is amazing. Listen, when you can come into town and beat the morning rush hour, it's always nice. When I could get across town in 10 minutes, what might otherwise take me 45 minutes. It is unbelievable. Listen, we got a great show today. So glad to be joined by Hans this morning. Sean Kennedy is going to be joining us in the next hour from Virginians for Safer Communities. We got Zach Smith from the Heritage Foundation joining us as well in the 7 a.m. hour. And yesterday we were talking about Roblox, and we were talking about this guy named Schlepp. He's a gamer who was kicked off of Roblox. He's joining us along with his lawyer, Stephen Vanderpoorten. I'm going to mess that up, Hans, as we get through the rest of the day today. Several times, be prepared for that. But in the meantime, listen, we got some big news. A story broke last week, and by the way, I got a correction yesterday. It's not just Christopher Rufo and the folks at the City Journal who broke the story about Al-Shabaab. I'll actually go back through, Hans, while we're talking about this. There was an earlier report that spurred Chris Rufo and others on this story about how the Minnesota taxpayers are sending millions of dollars to Al-Shabaab, essentially. And yesterday, the president, or it was over the weekend, the president signed an executive order saying that these immigrants, the Somali immigrants in Minnesota, should no longer be given temporary protected status here. I know this is near and dear to your heart. Your reaction to this?
Well, I think it's actually about time. And,
yeah.
I saw Tim Walz, and others saying, oh, he can't do that. Well, sorry, actually, he can do that.
Yeah.
And they're threatening to sue. I think the Minnesota AG was saying, oh, they're going to sue over this. Well, there's a real problem with that. The federal law that sets up temporary protected status gives the sole determination for that to the president and the Secretary of Homeland Security, and it has a specific provision saying no court.
Right.
No court can review the granting of it or the termination of it. So this will be another instance. If a federal judge jumps in, it'll be another rogue federal judge basically violating the law by granting an injunction if they do that.
Hans, it's interesting because I actually was just dealing with on a separate issue having to do with what the Department of Education is doing with regards to which professions are professional for the purpose of student loan grants. And I had to explain to somebody that in the wake of the Loper-Bright decision of 2024, the agencies are effectively constrained, they're in how they interpret the law. And
right.
That what Congress says goes. There are reasons for this, and this cuts both ways. What you just said about the TPS issue, in that no court can review it either for or against, right, if it's granted
right.
or removed.
Right.
Talk about why that is, why we don't want the courts to get involved either way.
Well, because, look, it's a lone federal judge isn't in a position to make the kind of judgments about national security, for example, that
right.
are involved in granting TPS status. And they shouldn't be involved. And you may recall, Andrew, that the administration did the same thing with Venezuelans, right? They
right.
ended them temporary protected status. You had this terrible judge in San Francisco issue an injunction saying you couldn't do that. The Supreme Court had to step in.
Right.
And suspend that injunction. And even though they didn't give an explanation for it, I have no doubt because they know the statute says the courts can't get into this.
Right, and that's just it. This idea. I mean, I can only imagine what it would have been like under the FDR administration if all of a sudden the courts were getting involved with how he was prosecuting the Second World War. I mean,
Right.
it just creates. It not only does it create chaos, but it minimizes, or it has a major deal on how we go about defending this nation. And obviously, there are certain things the courts can do and should do if the executive branch oversteps its power. But this is not one of those circumstances, is it, Hans?
No, it's not. And listen, you and I both know that if the kind of federal judges we have in office today were in office during World War II, they would have been trying to interfere with the way we were conducting the war. It's just
100%.
That's a certainty.
Right. Of course, FDR would have turned around and threatened to pack the court and expand the court, done all of those things, because Lord knows this is what FDR wanted to do. So this story, and again, thanks to Ryan Thorpe and Chris Rufo up at the Manhattan Institute. Their piece, the largest funder of Al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer. Trump's response to the report was, Minnesota, under Governor Walz, is a hub of fraudulent money laundering activity. I am, as President of the United States, hereby terminating, effective immediately, the temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota. Somali gangs are terrorizing the people of that great state, and billions of dollars are missing. Send them back to where they came from. It's over. And, as Heather pointed out, thankfully, to all of us, this piece from the USA Today, it's not as though this happened immediately. This is something that has been brewing for nearly 2 decades now. George W. Bush resettled about 9,800 Somali refugees in Minnesota. The Obama administration's State Department settled 54,000 Somali refugees in Minnesota. I mean, this is astounding, but this is by design on the part of the Obama administration to settle these refugees in areas that might not otherwise be, shall we say, reliable Democrat voters.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, Minnesota has, I do a lot on election issues.
Right.
And the security process they have to, for example, verify the citizenship of people who register to vote in Minnesota is non-existent.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt, actually, that a lot of the Somalis who are there who are not U.S. citizens are probably registered and voting. Now, I'm sure they're going to claim, oh, that's not true, but if they don't verify citizenship, how do we know?
Right. We got this here. Bombshell. This is from the New York Post. Bombshell ice sweep in Minneapolis, St. Paul finds 50% of immigrants had committed immigration fraud. Listen, I'm going to pull in, by the way, Hans, this story out of Prince George's County, talking about election fraud and illegal immigration. The story of the Iowa. The Iowa superintendent of schools,
right,
who was an illegal immigrant. I want to get your thoughts on that. It is 5:15 a.m. WMAL.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
So, Hans, we got this strange story a couple of months ago that came out about this superintendent in Ohio. By the way, what it does, this story underscores the issue of do your homework, check your math. When I see someone's record being presented to me as some kind of expertise, I go and I do the math. I go check the homework. I go check their credentials to see what's out there. This was, we got this. A legal fight is brewing over a Maryland County Board of Elections heavy redactions to the voter registration records of an illegal immigrant who served as superintendent of Ohio's largest school system until he was arrested by federal authorities earlier this year. This is a crazy story. Justin Reamer, CEO and president of the conservative legal group Restoring Integrity and Trust in Elections, told Fox News Digital on Friday, when I saw the news reporting and they showed screenshots of the registration applications with all this information redacted, This is the story of Ian Andre Roberts. Reamer was reacting to the Prince George's County's Board of Elections' recent release of voter registration documents, which included blacking out Roberts' sex, whether he checked the citizenship box, his date, and other information. The election attorney is representing, we know this, blah, blah, blah. Roberts, who is originally from Guyana and first entered the U.S. in 1994, was working as the superintendent of the Des Moines Public School District when ICE arrested him in September. He was not legally permitted to work in this country after an employment authorization card expired in 2000. And by all accounts, Hans, it sounds like he was, actively voting and doing all of these things. Your thoughts here?
Well, yeah, but Maryland doesn't want people to know that.
Right.
And by the way, they're violating federal law by blacking out that information under the National Voter Registration Act. The public is entitled to see information like that, but they don't want people to know about that. But don't forget, it was Maryland about a decade ago. I'm trying to remember her name. Remember, about a decade ago, there was a woman who won the Democratic primary for a congressional seat until they discovered that she was registered in both Maryland and Florida and had voted in both states in multiple elections. And the only reason anybody ever found out about it, which tells you how bad things are in Maryland, is because she ran for office and somebody started doing some opposition research on it. Election officials, they didn't figure it out.
Yeah, she was running in the 1st Congressional District against Andy Harris. And my favorite part of this, because I was living on the Eastern Shore at the time, my favorite, actually, next to the fact that she was voting illegally, my second favorite part of the story was she had been handing out fake $1 million bills as campaign like a campaign stunt, and all I could think of was, here's a Democrat who doesn't understand. You need to be fighting against the idea that Democrats are profligate spenders. But handing out $1 million bills, that's maybe that's not sending the message that you think it's actually sending to people. But at the end of the day, this is your work at Heritage, Hans. What do you estimate? How many? Do we have any idea how many illegals are voting? I mean, are we finally starting to peel back this problem?
Well, there was a study came out a number of years ago from some academics, actually in Virginia, who, by the way, were then exiled from the academic community because they had dared to do this. Based on survey data, for example, they estimated that in the 2008 election, when Obama won the election, that probably about 6% of the aliens in the country had actually voted in that election, which they pointed out in North Carolina, for example. He barely won that state, and that would have been enough. The alien voting itself would have been enough for him to win.
Let me make sure I'm understanding this. So 6. You said 6%,
right?
All right. So let's assume for a moment that that's stayed constant. So let's say that 94% of illegal immigrants they don't get involved. That's fine, but 6%, and 6%. Let's say you put. By the way, Hans, here's a tip. Never do math on the air. I'm about to do math on the air, just so you know. So let's say you have 60,000 new Somalis and these are legal immigrants. But let's say 60,000 Somalis in Minnesota. So 10% of that would be 6,000. So so about 6,600, 7,000 or so illegally participating in Minnesota's elections. That if you have a tight election, that makes all the difference. If you add 11 million illegal immigrants over the course of the Biden administration, 6% of that is about 500,000 votes, or 600,000 votes. That's that can have an insane impact on the election, can it?
Oh, right. And keep in mind that states like Minnesota, California, not only do they give driver's licenses to aliens who are here illegally, they have automatic voter registration.
Yeah, of course.
When you go in for your driver's license, they don't ask you, do you want to register to vote? They just register you.
No, that's exactly. It's so funny. I got this thing today. This week there are comments due in a rulemaking at the Department of Transportation because that's sort of my daily job, folks, is, looking at this stuff, about whether or not we're actually asking the question as to whether or not states should be able to give commercial driver's licenses to people who don't actually have addresses in the United States. I mean, this is no. The answer is no. Listen, we got so much more to get to. Right now, it's 5:23 on WMAL. The shutdown wasn't about the shutdown. The shutdown was about putting these screws to Virginia voters so they'd feel the pain, so they'd elect Democrats, because the battleground for the Democrats is all about redistricting and increasing the number of Democrat House seats. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Hans von Spakovsky about that, the Texas issue. I'm Andrew Langer. This is O'Connor and Company. It's 5:30.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. WMAL. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Well, good morning, one and all. Happy Tuesday to everybody. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor on O'Connor and Company, sitting alongside Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation. Hey, Hans, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fine, and this is the first time we've done the show together. But I was trying to think, you and I, boy, we've known each other a long time.
Listen, well, let's not even go there. How long you and I have known each other? Yes, we've sort of danced around the movement together quite a bit. We'll talk more about that in a second. It is 5:37 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are making sense of the news. Got a great show today, as we always do on O'Connor Company. Sean Kennedy from Virginians for Safer Communities. He's going to join us in the next hour to talk about all kinds of shenanigans happening in the Old Dominion. We got Zach Smith from the Heritage Foundation. Yes, Hans and I are going to talk about these dismissals of the indictments against Letitia James and James Comey. We're going to get Zach Smith's thoughts on that. And then yesterday we talked about this Roblox issue. We're going to have Schlepp, the gamer who was kicked off Roblox for trying to get rid of child predators, as well as his lawyer, Stephen Vanderpoorten. They're going to join us in the 8 a.m. hour to talk about this. Now, I dropped this thesis as we were going into the news a couple of minutes ago. Hans, this idea to me that the reason why the Democrats were pushing for the shutdown to last past the election, and I knew as soon as the election was over, they were going to come to the table, and it took a little bit longer than I thought, but they came to the table. But to me, it was about inflicting the maximum amount of pain on Virginia federal workers to make sure that they got to the polls so that they could vote Democrats in, because it's all about redistricting. They want to get their seats. They want to change the makeup of Congress through redistricting, not through the electoral process. I want to get your reaction to that thesis before we start talking about what's happening down in Texas.
Oh no, listen, I agree, because there was no other rational reason for them to put up this huge fight to keep the government basically shut down.
Right.
Particularly because, unlike prior shutdowns, they were actually getting blamed for it.
Right.
In the past, they've always managed to get the Republicans blamed for it, even though they were doing it. But they knew, even if they were getting blamed for it, the federal workers, the vast majority of whom are very liberal. I mean, I know that. I used to be one.
Sure.
They were going to blame the Trump administration, and they would get out to the polls because they were mad, and they would vote the way the Democrats wanted them to vote.
Let's talk about this, because so things are very tight in the House, especially. Things shift obviously over in the Senate a little bit as well, but in the House, it is tight. That's why the Marjorie Taylor Greene announcement is a bit of a stunner, though that is a safe seat. So presumably it's going to go to a Republican once they have their special election. But the Democrats are having problems actually winning at the polls. So for them, they can remake the districts. That's one way of doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, narrowed a two vote margin in the House. By the way, if people might wonder, why did Marjorie Taylor Greene have her resignation not till January 5th? You know why?
Why?
because then she'll have been in Congress 5 years, and her pension vests.
I know. Yes, this is. Yeah, I found that a little hinky as well. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but let's talk about what's going on down in Texas, because this is. Democrat-backed groups, along with the U.S. Department of Justice, filed briefs with the Supreme Court on Monday as the High Court is set to decide whether or not Texas can use its newly drawn congressional maps. Because, again, trying to push back on what the Democrats are doing in places like Virginia and California, Texas is doing it. But what sets Texas's redistricting map apart? What sets what the Republicans are doing then there apart from what the Democrats are doing?
Well, what was really interesting about that case was that, you had a 3-judge panel. The Democrats all sued saying, oh, this had nothing to do with politics.
Right.
It was based on race.
Yeah.
And you actually had a 3-judge panel rule, yep, it was based on race. It was 2-1.
Yeah.
The one was Jerry Smith. He's and they issued an injunction against use of plan. The dissent was written by Jerry Smith. Jerry Smith is this long, well-respected judge from the Fifth Circuit. He wrote the most scathing denunciation of the majority opinion I have ever read, and it included at the end 2 pages of all the lies and misrepresentations that he says the majority put in their opinion. It was quite something, and it led the Supreme Court to suspend that injunction.
Sure, right, and they've got to take this up. The map limbo is creating a lot of uncertainty for candidates who are trying to run for Congress. Congressman Lloyd Doggett said he would not run for re-election in his Austin area district after the new map combined he and Democrat Congressman Greg Kasar's districts. But after the lower court blocked the 2025 map, Doggett said he would seek re-election. I mean, there is a certain degree of uncertainty that needs to take place. But largely, where these situations are happening in Republican states, right? It's because they are trying to correct historic wrongs that are out there. In Maryland, right? I mean, we could talk about Virginia for a moment, but in Maryland, it is also about naked power. I mean, by all rights, given the voter registration in Maryland, 2/3 of or a full third of Maryland's House representation should be Republican. But of course, no, it's 7-1 in Maryland with only Andy Harris, and that's not good enough for the Democrats in Maryland. They want to district Andy Harris out of the office. So this is the game, and it's an important game, isn't it, Hans?
Well, it is, and what's interesting about this is, Democrats are blaming the Republicans for engaging in political gerrymandering. The Republicans are far behind Democrats across the country. Democrats in states like Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island have gerrymandered it to the point where there's not a single Republican seat. Right. Even though Republicans, like in the last election, got anywhere between 35-45% of the statewide vote.
Right, and that's the issue here. I mean, we could go down this road and negotiate it, but as long as they're going to play this game, we're going to have to play it back. This is the survival of the Republic is at stake here. We got more coming up. Listen, we're going to be talking about this video. This wonderful video that the Democrats put out last week. It is 5:44 on WMAL.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Like us, you all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad, but from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
You can? You must? I don't know. By the way, Hans, I love the fake Aaron Copland music in the bed right beneath it. I mean, this is outrageous on so many levels. Not the least of which is because you're right. You're a lawyer, Hans. You got a JD, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
There's got to be a case or controversy if you're going to bring this stuff up, and there is no case or controversy here. Yet they're raising this video. It's a lot of smoke where there's no fire. And so the Department of War announced on Monday that it has launched an investigation into Senator Mark Kelly for his participation in the Seditious Six video, in which Democrat lawmakers encouraged military members to ignore orders from President Trump, their commander-in-chief. Kelly, a retired Navy captain, could be called back into active duty service in order to face court-martial proceedings or administrative measures. This is an interesting tactic. I'm not sure I like it. I understand what they're trying to do, but what do you make of this?
Well, what Kelly and the rest of them ought to do is come out and apologize, and
right.
They need to withdraw this video because remember, one of these representatives was interviewed and said, "Well, what unlawful orders are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And they couldn't name one.
Right.
So this is really a general harangue to basically interfere with civilian control of the military because they're basically saying Donald Trump, any orders he issues, that's got to be illegal and you shouldn't obey them. And I love. That is a threat to good order in the military.
100%. Right. Listen, and here's what I love. David Frum, we could always get a nice laugh out of David Frum, what he's doing. What his example of illegal orders is Pete Hegseth renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War. I mean, that is apparently the best that they can do. Okay, I guess we can all just sort of keep calling it the DOD. I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of folks on the right as well who still refer to the Department of War as the DOD. But that's you hit the nail on the head there, Hans. The issue is raising the question in people's minds so as to undermine the chain of command. That's right. What they're trying to do. And by the way, folks, I pointed this out last week. We had this directive that was signed by the Deputy Secretary of Defense, put out by the White House, supported by the White House by Joe Biden back in September of 2024. A DOD Directive 5240.01, which authorizes the use of lethal force against civilians, and I don't have the specifics here in front of me, for something on the order of 96 hours. Before the president actually has to intervene. So you tell me which is the more dangerous situation, right? Pete Hegseth ordering that we refer to the Department of War as the Department of War, or the potential for a President Biden or a President Kamala Harris to authorize the use of military force against civilians. Which apparently, by the way, is legal because it's there's this DOD order that's out there. Your thoughts here, Hans?
Well, look, that is an issue, but the real problem here is that Donald Trump doesn't give orders to privates and corporals. There's this whole layered process. He says something to Hegseth. Hegseth goes to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Everything goes through all these layers, all these officers down to the operational level. And anywhere along the line, if someone actually believes that a potential order somehow is unlawful, they have an entire JAG Corps they can consult about it. So the idea that the president is calling up units and say, go do this and it's illegal, that is ridiculous.
Right.
That's why this is just a political diatribe by people who ought to know better. Yeah, they all served, but, man, this really makes you question their judgment.
Yeah, so David Frum doubling down on this. David Frum, who's, of course, from The Atlantic. The Department of War has no jurisdiction to enforce because there is no such thing as the Department of War. The department was titled by an act of Congress in 1949. The title can only be changed by Congress. To assert otherwise is to issue an illegal order. Yeah, I'm getting a little animated. I'm just trying to impress Hans here. Listen, we got more to get to. It's 5:53 on WMAL.